This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
This table is really tilted.
Excuse me? Am I gonna get a chance to speak?
Maybe I should take that back.
Denied. Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Take a giant step for mankind.
Welcome to the Tilted Table with your hosts, Sean and Joe.
Folks, welcome to the Tilted Table, the internet's answer to a question that no one asked. I am Sean Landon Clark, one of your co-pilots for this journey.
And I am Joey Joe, aka the Fracky Mac, the other co-pilot on this rocket ship.
And we talked about a number of different discussions that we could have this week. So what would you like to jump on first, Joe?
One of the topics we were talking about that I think is going to be fun is I love getting stuck on rabbit trails on YouTube. Like when you've got time to burn and you just find like one video and you're like, oh, it looks pretty interesting. I'm going to click on that. And then, you know, as soon as it ends, you're like, wow, that was really good. Ooh, let's see what else other videos they have. And then the algorithm keeps recommending things. And then 3+ hours later, you're like, man, I got to get on with my life. You know, this is interesting, but I got stuff to do and places to go.
Yeah, rabbit holes on the internet are the worst, especially YouTube. Yeah. You know, you watch a video and you've got all this selection on the side. For sure. Yeah.
And the comment section, like you were mentioning on some of these YouTube videos, is absolutely outstanding.
Oh, yeah.
I've actually had to screenshot some of the comments, like especially on some like comedy ones that I'll watch, because the comments are just hilarious on their own.
Mm-hmm, yeah, for sure.
I'm a huge history buff, so there's a channel on YouTube called Biographics.
Okay.
And they basically do, well, as it says, biographies of famous people, interesting people.
Okay.
And the gentleman that does it does a great job. Cookie says that he talks way too fast, and
okay.
I
talk way too fast.
She's like, I don't know if I can handle too much of this guy, but yeah, I don't know how many hours of my life have now been spent watching Biographics, but it's awesome.
And when you start watching, let's say a particular subject, let's say I'm going to use World War II because that's always a popular subject. If you start with Adolf Hitler, algorithm on the side gives you from that channel probably all these other ones.
Sure. It'll be like, oh, you like Hitler, you might like Stalin.
Right.
Or, you know, hey, whatever happened to Mussolini?
So my question would be, how many of these biopics that you've seen that were people that you would have never on your own said, oh, I want to look up this person?
I think there's a bunch. One of the subject matters, and funny you mentioned World War II because I love World War II videos.
Oh, yeah, me too.
But one I spent, I don't know, 4 hours watching was on the Khmer Rouge. And man, that was just wild. And I was already aware of like who they were and the time period and everything.
Yeah. Brutal.
Horrific.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that actually went down and that nobody today, you know, really talks about it.
Well, it's Cambodia, so I don't think it's going to get as much attention. Plus, I think that when you think about mass killings of dictators and leaders, I think World War II often takes over because it's a more classically designed story. Mm-hmm. You know, the Nazis representing this ultimate bad guy, and here comes America to stomp him out and save the world. Mm-hmm. Right? You don't get that same story with, let's say, you know, Stalin. Stalin killed more of his own people than Hitler ever did.
Tons.
Yeah. And so Pol Pot in Cambodia.
Oof.
I mean, yeah, he killed probably more than well, I don't know if he killed more than Hitler, but it's close. It's got to be, right?
I want to say it was.
It was
in the millions.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the things though about the algorithm that makes it kind of addictive, and then like, oh, you'll click on things that you never would have clicked, like say the Khmer Rouge, and like one of the videos that might pop up would be like, when UFOs landed in Cambodia, this happened, ... And you're like, oh, wow. I want to click on that and see what happened.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you get a really jacked up algorithm because you start getting suggested like, you know, did the moon landing really happen? Like that kind of stuff.
Right, yeah. So, you know, if it's going to be Pol Pot and Cambodia, the next suggestion is going to be something about Cambodia, but not necessarily about Pol Pot, right? Some other thing. And then next thing you know, you get the aliens landed in Cambodia. 2-3 hours later, you're watching things about the moon landing being fake because you've moved over into that arena of algorithm.
Oh yeah, like Michael Jackson and Marilyn Monroe are kicking it on the dark side of the moon, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's plenty of those things.
And after that many hours and like scrolling, then you're like, yeah, I can totally see how that makes sense.
Right, of course, yeah.
Right.
You know, if it's on the internet, it
Has to be true.
It has to be true. If somebody put together a video all that time and it's not true, never. What other biopics have you seen that you weren't looking for?
You know, I'm not really interested, not that I don't care per se, but I'm not interested in like Revolutionary War type stuff.
Okay.
You know, so, I mean, I think it's interesting, but it's not something I would ever go search out on my own. And there has been, you know, like a biography about Benedict Arnold, which I was like, man, that guy's
Super cool.
right. So again, I think that's one of the fun things about YouTube and algorithms is
Sure.
you get to be exposed and learn things that you would never have found on your own.
Yeah. My story about going down the rabbit hole, this is definitely interesting because I went to a place that I would never, ever go, ever, in a million years, ever look up. So there's a YouTube content creator named DJ Vlad. You might be familiar with him. Okay.
No.
So DJ Vlad, he has maybe 5 million followers.
Okay.
And he just interviews people. He interviews a lot of hip hop people, more underground. That's what he comes from, that hip hop arena. And this expands into people like porn stars. It expands into like mobsters and things like that. Very legit channel. Brings on people that I grew up with. You know, a lot of these old rappers that were maybe midline kind of rappers. You know, you have to really be into rap to know who they are. And you get these full interviews and they talk about, I mean, extensively. These interviews are like 2-3 hours long. So DJ Vlad has this massive platform. He brings on mobsters, some very well-known old mobsters from like the 80s and whatnot. Well, he brings on a mobster named Anthony Ramundi.
Okay.
And this guy has the most outrageous fucking story that it's so off the wall. And I'll give you 2 things he claims he did. He got arrested when he was 16 for murdering somebody. And the judge let him make a decision. You can go to prison for this, or you can go to Vietnam, right? That whole idea that, well, you can go to war or whatever, and you can serve your time there. He claims that he became an expert sniper, and by the end of the war, he had killed 300 people because he was such a badass, right? Which is an outrageous lie. It's not even close. I think the most confirmed kills by a person is like 150 or something.
Something like that.
Yeah. Right? He also claims that in 1978, he killed Pope John Paul I. Now, for those folks that don't know what this is, Pope John Paul I died. And I guess it was under mysterious circumstances of some sort. And then all these conspiracy theories started coming up that he may have been poisoned. Anthony Ramundi on DJ Vlad sits there and says that him and his crew went to Vatican City, somehow snuck into the Vatican, and slipped Pope John Paul I cyanide and killed him. So he's on DJ Vlad. Mind you, this is not like a small channel, right?
I just looked it up. It's a hair under 6 million subscribers.
Yeah. And you listen to his story. It's outrageous. When I saw that, I was just like, is this real? You would assume it's on Vlad. He must have been vetted, right? So I decided to look up Anthony Ramundi. And I find a bunch of smaller YouTube channels. Most of them are these mob-related channels with like 3,000-4,000 subscribers. And these are people who are enamored with the mob. And there's one in particular, his name is the Fat Bald Sicilian. He's really, really smart guy. He's a street guy. He's now reformed, former drug addict, former drug dealer. He created a channel where he would interview people like Robert Eiler from Sopranos, other people from these old mob movies. And he also interviews real gangsters, guys that were in the mafia back in the 70s and the 80s in their heyday. Most of them just associates, not like higher ups or made men, but they would come on and tell all these stories. Now, the guys that would come on are all completely verified. They're all over the news. They serve time. There's no doubt of their legitimacy. Now, as he's doing this, his channel's growing. He starts getting a bunch of calls from a bunch of people who claim that they were in the mob, running with certain crews back in the day and doing all these crazy things. Well, he starts to realize that most of these people are just bullshitting, operating under the idea that if you're of the right age, you have a New York accent, and you can speak a bunch of gangster lingo, that you can tell all these wild stories about how back in the day, you were a big-time criminal, a big-time mafioso, and most of the people that were alive back then are dead now, and they can't verify you. So he got real sick of these people going onto these channels and claiming to be something that they're not. So he started calling them out. That's where Anthony Ramundi comes in. He saw Ramundi on Vlad, and he lost his shit that this guy can go on that platform, that size, and tell not just, a bunch of lies, like the most outrageous bullshit that no one would believe. So he was able to get his hands on Ramundi through another content creator, and he wanted to debate him. And they have this debate. Now, of course, I'm looking up Anthony Ramundi. I find Fat Bald Sicilian debating him. Then I go to Fat Bald Sicilian's channel and I start watching his content. So the community that FBS created is called MobTube. And most of the people on this are low-life scumbags, ex-cons, wannabe gangsters, some kind of gangster, highly uneducated, with the Fat Bald Sicilian being the only one, or really one of the few, that is actually smart, articulate, very quick-witted. And mostly his content consists of him battling all these different content creators and roasting the living hell out of them. It's kind of like the Jerry Springer show, with FBS kind of being the Jerry Springer or the ringmaster of it all. And it's entertaining to watch. He's fun to watch, but it's definitely an arena I would not have voluntarily looked for or stepped in if it hadn't been for the rabbit hole of Ramundi and DJ Vlad.
So when you log on to YouTube, and in the just in or the recommended screen, is it a bunch of random videos based on your varied interests, or is it pretty consistent on the content?
Well, I would definitely say that, there's things that I look up. I would say my recommendations are in line with it, for sure. But I noticed that the algorithm changes based on what you've been looking at, let's say over the last day or so. Mm-hmm. So if for some unknown reason I'll use FBS as an example. If I watch one of his live streams, he goes live twice a day. If I watch both shows on a given day, oh yeah, all of a sudden I'm getting his stuff. I'm getting people that are related to him in terms of the people that he fights and all that stuff. But the minute I don't watch that fades pretty quick. But most of those channels, and I'm talking about, they're small. Like FBS, I think, has like 7,000 subscribers. I think the next biggest one is maybe 1,000, 2,000. Like these are really tiny channels, gotcha. Right? So, but if I'm looking at anything else, like Moon, I think I turned you on to Moon. So if I watch Moon, because he's got, I don't know, over 1 million now.
Yep.
That, yeah, those algorithms or those recommendations stay longer. I think the smaller channels, if you're not consistently watching that stuff, the algorithm disappears a lot quicker. I don't see those recommendations.
Got it.
Yeah.
So is it like mine is a blend of music, concerts, biographies, World War II stuff. There's some political stuff, funny political stuff. And then obviously there's a dash of football in there.
Yeah,
so
sure.
It's got me pegged pretty well.
Yeah. For me, it still seems to be based largely on what I've been recently searching. I've been watching a lot of stuff about Corey Feldman and Corey Haim. And there's a bunch of podcasts that talk about Corey Feldman. He's a musician. I don't know if you ever heard Corey Feldman's music. We may have talked about this.
Yeah, we touched on it briefly.
Yeah, so every time he does a concert, he embarrasses himself to no end that all these podcasts that I listen to usually will latch on. They'll cover it. And so...
Sounds like he provides a lot of content for them.
Yeah. And
or not content, ammunition.
Yeah. Ultimately, because Feldman constantly tours and he constantly makes a jackass of himself on stage, there's always content. So the more I would run into like looking up Feldman or Haim, and I started for a specific reason probably months ago. And I grew up watching, the two Coreys, License to Drive and The Lost Boys. These are great films, right? They were iconic back in the 80s. The more I would look up some of the stuff I wanted to find out, like then it led me to those podcasts. I seem to keep landing the Corey Feldman clips.
Okay.
And I'll watch them. And now if you go onto my computer right now, probably look at YouTube, I'm sure the top recommendations will be something about Corey Feldman. But I do find it funny because the good comedians, Corey Feldman gives them a lot of ammo.
I remember you telling me about some of that. And well, another, I guess, rabbit trail is it's such a great tool for learning. Like I mentioned, for the last 2 months or so, I've been taking lessons, learning how to DJ and play house music and whatnot. I do have in-person lessons, and I'll do it in virtual reality. There's a program called Tribe, which is a lot of fun. Okay. But then with my mixing board, I'll be like, I don't know how to do X. And so I'll just hop onto YouTube and be like, Pioneer Flex 4 mixer, how to, and then I'll get stuck on rabbit trails of learning my mixing board, which is a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. So I love YouTube. I got to make sure I moderate the amount of time that I spend on there, because if I give it latitude, I can be on there for a long time. What's a really random recommendation that's come into your feed that you're like, how did that get there? And did you click on it?
Oh my God, I have to think about that. I'll start with you. Give me a moment to think about it. What about you?
I think maybe it would be like a hip hop conspiracy type of deal.
Okay.
Like, more of like a who shot Tupac, who shot Biggie, or whatever happened to, ABC rapper. Cookie and I found a rapper, I think he's from South Carolina, Froggy Fresh. And the video that it just randomly popped into our feed, it was called Just Got Dunked On. And it was super cheesy, like, little picture that linked to the album. But it had something like 35 million views. I'm like, well, 35 million views can't be wrong, right? So then we ended up going down a Froggy Fresh album to the point that a year for Christmas, I got a present from my sister-in-law was a signed album by Froggy Fresh.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah. And then he just disappeared from the internet.
Oh, he's just gone now?
Gone. But yeah, I'll have to send you some of those videos later. But it was so random how that popped up. And then we were just like, oh, this is really cool. And there's another one that popped up into our feed. And we still watch this guy, Blind Fury.
Yeah, I know Blind Fury.
Oh, man, that guy is just wicked.
Yeah, he was
wicked.
He was on God, that had to be 20 years ago. He was on some rapping reality show. That's how I know him.
Yeah,
I don't know whatever happened to him, but he was good.
Oh, he's still. It's probably like once a week he'll put out a new track, and he'll have the live chat on the side of the screen and whatnot.
Oh, that's cool.
And the one from just within the last 30 days. I mean, I had to favorite that, and I've played it a bunch of times. It is
okay.
It's some next level material.
Okay, that actually now it brings back my memory of my random experience. A guy named Mad Child.
Yeah, I have a lot of Mad Child. Swollen members.
Yes, Swollen Members. So I don't know what I looked up. I don't know how he appeared on my feed. So I'm just like, who's this guy with face tats? I clicked on him, and yeah, that's how I discovered good old Mad Child.
Yeah, I think Cookie and I have been listening to them for, I'd say, a decade. And he just did an album or a track here in the last, say, 18 months with Tom McDonald that went viral. And
you know what? Now I'm thinking about it, it had to be through Tom McDonald because he was getting a lot of publicity on the news about being some sort of anti-woke rapper, white guy. And yeah, that's right, because he may have done more songs. I know one song he did with Mad Child. So I'm sure that's how Mad Child appeared in my feed.
Yeah, I think Tom's done 2, because one of them is called Fire Emojis, and that's on my workout mix.
Yeah, and Swollen Members is playing live in August.
Is it really?
In LA, I think. Yeah.
I didn't know they were all still together.
They just got back together for a show. I think they need money.
Well, it's, Mad Child's story. There's I forget the song or the album, but the lyric talks about how he built a hidden room in his house specifically for just doing drugs. Yeah,
I've gotten a lot of history on him. Been around for, since the early 2000s. Their first record was Balance with Swollen Members. And yeah, a really good album. And over the years, he destroyed his career and his physical appearance and nearly died from drug use, destroyed his relationships, sobered up.
He got banned from entering the United States.
He sobered up. Swollen Members, they got back together 2010s-ish, did a couple of albums, really good albums. And then he fell back into addiction. And the other guy, Prevail, he got fed up. And the DJ, Rob the Viking, got fed up, and they went their separate ways.
Right.
And he eventually cleaned himself up, and I would say for the past maybe 4 or 5 years, he, maybe a little bit longer than that, he's been trying to rebuild his career. Unfortunately, he's, in his mid-late 40s now, and I'm not entirely sure that he can ever sort of climb the ladder back to the top.
Oh, real quick side note. You mentioned Balance. That's one of the few albums I have of the instrumental only version.
Okay, yeah.
And I used to, when I worked in a professional setting, I would always have music playing in my office, and I would play Balance instrumental in the background of my office, and people would walk in, they're like, this has got a really great beat and it's super chill, and what are you listening to? But I could never say the band's name working where I worked. So I would just say, hey, it's like an underground hip hop artist,
Well, you can always say it's Rob the Viking because that's the guy who makes the beats. Now, if you want to say Swollen Members, I think you're all right saying Swollen Members as long as you tell them what it means. And Mad Child specifically said that the name came from the idea of a crew. We have a bunch of people with us. We're Swollen Members, right? We're getting bigger and bigger, right? That kind of thing. And it's supposed to be kind of a shout out to the fans because we're all part of the crew. So as the audience grows, that's why we're Swollen Members, just getting bigger and bigger. The Battle Axe Warriors, right?
Yeah, exactly.
See, I didn't know you listened to Swollen Members.
Yeah, see, you learned something new, man.
It doesn't surprise me. You listen to all kinds of music, Canadian rappers.
Yes,
Wouldn't
obscure
surprise me,
underground,
right?
yeah.
It doesn't surprise me that you know who they are.
Okay, so I think the question was, what's a out of left field random recommendation that popped into your feed that you clicked on and then you went down that rabbit trail?
I'll tell you one that I stumbled across that I really liked a lot. Sitcom pilots that either never made it or actually the original sitcom pilot that from a famous show that was reshot and done again. And I found that to be super fascinating. I'm like, I kind of knew that these things existed, but I didn't really think about it. It's one of those situations where you're kind of like, I know that when they shoot a pilot for a TV show, it doesn't always get picked up. Okay, so it's gone. That's fine. But ones that do get picked up often will sign the series or will buy the series, but we need you to change the actors. We don't like this guy in this role. And then they would do it again. And then, the series that we all know and love, there's actually a pilot episode that has different actors in it. Right. So the first one I discovered, and it blew me away, is Full House.
Oh, okay.
So
was everybody different?
No, only Bob Saget. It was a different person playing Bob Saget's Danny Tanner character.
Okay.
Now I'm not a big Full House fan, but I'm very familiar with the show. Obviously, I'm from that era.
Americana.
So I was, and again, it appeared in my feed. It was the full episode of Full House's pilot, the original pilot, without Bob Saget. So I clicked on it, and it's a fully produced. You would not know that this is any different than any other Full House episode. And it has the same intro, but except where Danny Tanner, Bob Saget as Danny Tanner appears, it's another comedian. And it's the same exact pilot, same script, same lines, just a completely different dude playing Danny Tanner. And I watched it, and I was sitting there going like, you gotta be kidding me. And I'm like, how many more of these things exist? And all it takes, click on that video, look on your right side. Married with Children. The original pilot episode had 2 different kids. I watched it, and it's freaky because I grew up on Married with Children. It's one of my all-time favorite shows. It is weird to see Kelly and Bud Bundy, not Christina Applegate and David Faustino. And it's the same exact pilot episode.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's a rabbit hole I've gone down. And that's an interesting thing to watch, especially if you're familiar with the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
Leave a like on the video. I know you're enjoying this. Can you shut up?
The internet's answer to a question that was never asked. The Tilted Table with Sean and Joe.
And it begs the question, when looking up things that you never thought to ask. I'm a huge Calvin and Hobbes fan, and it's like, whatever happened to Bill Watterson? Yeah. And so I literally just one day it popped in my head. I hopped on YouTube, Bill Watterson, Calvin and Hobbes, and sure enough, there is a documentary. Yeah. Where he's at today, and yeah, I love it, man. I can spend way too much time on there.
He just quit doing it, right? Yeah. So it wasn't an issue of
It wasn't money. It was just like, and I'm done.
Okay. That's interesting.
And I think that the most unusual / interesting thing about Bill Watterson is how he never licensed Calvin and Hobbes. Like Garfield, Heathcliff, there's all types of merch and T-shirts and swag and stickers, but that was never the case for Calvin and Hobbes, which is why you never had any of those kind of things. Sure. And those stickers on the back windows of their pickup trucks, right?
Well, people still make those stickers.
Yeah, they're all the bootleg. Yeah, bootleg. And I have a couple of bootleg Calvin and Hobbes items, but YouTube is a fascinating tool for learning, or whatever happened to X.
Yeah, I like the fact that there's so many people creating that there's information on anything. There's a documentary of just about anything that you're interested in. If it had any kind of legs or ground, or was even remotely famous at any point, at any time, at any part of the Western world in particular, there's usually a YouTube video about it. But definitely the algorithms, have led me into places that I normally would not have gone or thought about looking up that have been just gold mines.
Yeah, I think it's, there have been times where I'll just literally type in whatever pops into my head. Like, is there a Michael Jackson Tupac mashup? And there's a lot. Yeah.
I would be scared to go down that rabbit hole because, especially with AI now, Wow. There's everybody.
Well, speaking of AI, so then I did that search string is, AI mix of, and then just typed in the random name of an artist. And it's amazing the number of tracks that are out there that would totally fool you.
Sure.
If you just walked in the house and something was on, you're like, oh, I didn't know they were still live making music, or super deep cut or something. But one of my favorite topics I've gotten stuck on is, and I don't know if we've ever talked about this, 8D music. I mean, I guess there's
we did talk about that in the first episode.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
The one that's out currently right now.
That one, I think I've listened to most of those songs now, and it's I just I'll lay there on the floor with my headphones on, and it's fantastic.
Well, one of the other rabbit holes that I got trapped into, and I don't know how I got trapped into this hole. I'm sure it was just looking up something to do with a band I like. But the AI people who are, and we may have talked about this, I don't think we talked about this specifically, where they're using AI saying, what if Pantera had written Master of Puppets by Metallica? And it's pretty close. It sounds like Phil Anselmo singing it. It's definitely played in the style of Pantera, which is fine. You're going to see a lot of that. But the one that really fascinated me was when they're taking people who have passed on and the band got a new singer, and they said, well, what if, this example would be Alice in Chains, what if Lane Staley had sang on When Black Gives Way to Blue, which is one of Alice in Chains' albums with William Duvall, the new singer. And that's pretty cool. It's pretty close. A lot of those songs, especially with Alice in Chains, because they really haven't ever radically altered their sound. They still play the same style of music. When you get to When Black Gives Way to Blue, the music is nearly identical. So you can easily take Lane Staley and put him on top of those songs.
That's wild.
And you're just like, wow, what if Lane Staley didn't die? And what if they continued as Alice in Chains? This is what this album would have sounded like with Lane Staley singing. And here's the freaky part. The second song they released from that album is called Your Decision. And the song is about Lane Staley deciding to basically kill himself with drugs. So it's this really sad song that Jerry Cantrell sings. Then now you have Lane Staley singing a song about him killing himself with drugs. It's Your Decision. That's basically the thrust of that song. And the lyrics are really dark and powerful, but it's Jerry Cantrell singing to Lane Staley. Now I got Lane Staley literally singing to himself.
That's wild.
Yeah, that was a bit much. I listened to that. I'm like, I don't know if I could listen to this because I don't want to hear Lane Staley singing a song to himself about how you just basically gave up on life and killed yourself. I think this was a hard song for Jerry Cantrell to do because at some point he had to lay blame down on something. And if you know the story of Lane Staley, it's a bad story. It's not your typical drug overdose rock star type stuff. People tried to help him. He actively pushed everybody away, sat in his apartment, and over a period of years just killed himself on drugs. At some point,
sad. Well, especially in the context of the singing the song about yourself or to yourself. I mean, that's dark.
Freaky.
It's dark.
Freaky. Yeah, I can't listen. I've listened to it once, and I'm just like, I don't want to listen to that again. Yeah. There's almost to a level, there's a little bit of disrespect that somebody AI'd that.
Right. That's the infamous blurred line. I don't know if you should go there.
Well, I mean, if you take it to rap, can you imagine if they, piped in Eazy-E's voice over Dre Day and have Eazy-E just insulting himself?
Well, I think that would actually be kind of funny.
Yeah, that would be funny because that's a diss track, right? But something when dealing with death, especially like I said, especially when you have a song that is kind of I don't know if it's a note to Lane Staley, and it's a little bit harsh. This is you did this.
Well, speaking of creators and coming up with things that are super exciting, one of my favorite super subgenres is martial arts music videos set to rap music. You
know what? The algorithm's fucking with me because I saw on the side old martial arts films set to hip hop. I did not click on it though. I stayed away from that.
Especially if they do things like the movie 300 or The Matrix or Mortal Kombat or any of those set to some really cool underground hip hop. I totally dig that. That's why I asked if your YouTube algorithm gets all jacked up, because you start getting fed these things wait, I did the cartoon set to hip hop as a random clickbait thing. Why is my feed full of this now?
Yeah, I'm sure it depends on a number of factors. Like I said, if the person, or not say the person, but the content I'm looking at has a lot of subscribers, it seems like the algorithm stays around longer. If it's smaller channels, it seems like if I don't click on that type of stuff for a day or two, it disappears pretty quick.
Gotcha. Yeah, so, I don't ever click on shorts. I don't know why.
Yeah, I'm not a big shorts person either.
I stay away from that. Yeah, there's one channel called Circle with a CERCLE. And I don't know how these guys do it, but they basically rent out super famous places, historical places around the world, and then they have a DJ come in and a really small, intimate crowd, maybe 100, 200 people. Like an example is like they rented out the Eiffel Tower.
Okay.
And then they flew drones all around the Eiffel Tower, and then they had the DJ performing on the first platform. And you can get tickets to it. Like we'll get Cookie and I signed up on the email distribution list, but it's going to be some super crazy location. And the example that we got was I was super excited to get my first Circle email, and it says you've been invited, and I clicked on it and it was like, on Thursday this week there's going to be an underground concert like in an actual cavern in Slovakia.
Oh God.
I'm like, wait a second. I'm supposed to click here and in 3 days make it from the United States to a cave in Slovakia? Like, that would be cool if I had that ability. But
right. Yeah, you definitely better be rich and have a lot of free time on you. No responsibilities.
But Circle is a great channel, and I think we've watched most of the videos on there. But yeah, that's a highly recommend.
It's funny that you say they were doing a concert at a cave in Slovakia. For some reason, the algorithm hit me with stories of people who do caving. Spelunking in underground caves. And there are, of course, tragedy stories of people who aren't experienced enough and go into these caves and they start going into smaller and smaller areas and they get trapped, and sometimes they get rescued. A lot of times they don't. They die.
Most times they don't.
And for some reason, that algorithm has stuck in my feed for at least a week. I do click on them, though, because I do find this fascinating, people that are diving in caves, especially when you really learn about what it is. It doesn't... Again, I don't want to insult anybody that does caving or is interested in this kind of stuff. It doesn't look particularly fun. And, when you walk into a cave, especially if it's a big area, all these like cool waterfalls and, on what do you call them, ponds or whatever, the little bit lakes. The pools of water. But it always ends up the same where the further down they go and the further they drop down, the spaces get smaller and smaller. Like literally you have to crawl on your belly and it's barely enough to fit your body through, and people get stuck in them. Where they go down a really small tunnel and it dead ends, and now they're stuck. Like you can't turn around and go back.
Right.
Yeah, you're stuck there. And they have these caves mapped out, but the story's all the same. Like, oh, this cave is mapped out, but there are parts of it that haven't been fully mapped out yet. And Mr. Smith took a wrong turn thinking that he was going the right direction, and now he's stuck. And my first thought is like, you look at this stuff and you're like, who the fuck would crawl down to space? In some cases, the human body can't really fit through. I mean, some people suffocated because they're so tight, crammed into a small space, they can't breathe. Like I get,
I don't know about all that, man.
Right? And it's like I get caving. Like even if the space is a little bit tight, but the minute you're asking me to crawl into a crawl space, like I don't know, that's fun? I know that a lot of it is supposed to be that there's something on the other side. So you got to kind of crawl through this small space and eventually get to this big opening and it'll be this cool thing that, you can see.
It's like a Jules Verne, like the inside of the earth type of a thing.
Right. But I get that. But they have maps of these places and some of them clearly don't lead in those directions. So I was like, well, why? But again, I'm not a splunker and I'm not somebody who's going to crawl through caves. So I find those channels kind of entertaining because I'm not familiar with it, and I'm fascinated with people that do this for fun because it's disgusting and dirty and cold and wet, and I'm like, this doesn't like it'd be fun to me, but to each their own, of course, right? But I also like any kind of video where there is a tragedy or a rescue that needs to be attempted, especially in things that aren't commonly talked about. There's going to have the story of a rescue, on a ship or something that's, stranded or sinking and things like that or whatever, those kind of rescues are kind of cool too, but I like the stuff that's a little more obscure. No one talks about caving. So
I did click on one that was, I don't know what they specifically call it, but the scuba divers that do underwater caves. I'm like, man, that is so sketchy. And at what point did someone say, what sounds like a really good idea? We should go underwater, deep, find certain caves and see if we can find an air pocket and then try and get back out. Like, that doesn't compute in my brain at all.
I'm assuming that all of this has to do with people trying to be the first to do something or to discover something. So if you're scuba diving or caving, that you're going into some place that very few humans have gone. And on planet Earth, there's not a lot of those options. I mean, like, who doesn't want to be an astronaut and go to the moon? I mean, how many people have walked on the moon? So maybe if you can't become an astronaut and go onto the moon, you're stuck with Earth. So I'm going to try to find places that are maybe somewhat easily accessible to me, where I can actually go someplace and say, I crawled through this tight little cavern and I got to this area where there was this pond and these beautiful rock formations and water's been dripping down for a gazillion years, and I'm the first person to see this thing or to be at this thing. So maybe that's part of it. And scuba diving in particular, the ocean is pretty much uncharted in large parts of it. So if you can get down and get into something, and maybe you can come back and say, yeah, I was the first person to go in that, or I discovered a part of that cave that people haven't been in yet. That's the only reason I would think people would really want to do this.
I don't disagree with that, but that it becomes like super obscure. Like I can use chopsticks in both hands while wearing blue socks on a sunny day. Like, and I'm the first person to ever do it. Like, I don't know about all that.
But one seems like it's challenging. The other one, not so much. I don't know. I don't want to be bragging about being able to use chopsticks in both hands.
Just the thought of like the very strong probability of death. It would be an immediate turnoff.
Well, again, I think that's the other part of that is the thrill seek aspect. I mean, people do all kinds of stuff, and it's mostly just about the thrill. And it's just whatever medium they decide to do that in. If they're doing extreme skydiving or if they're doing extreme diving of some sort, so it's got to be about that adrenaline rush.
Oh, and right as I started talking about the underwater scuba caving, whatever they want to call it, I clicked on it once. I watched like 6 minutes, and then I clicked on something else because my anxiety had like skyrocketed.
Oh yeah.
Like, wait a second, your tanks. And this is what happened: is the person that was diving, because they're still slightly buoyant, their tanks on their back got wedged in the rocks above them, and they couldn't move. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to see how this ends. I'm sure it ends fine because there's a video about it, but I'm out.
Doesn't mean it ended well. Yeah, there was a caving story in Utah. It's called the Nutty Putty incident. I guess the cave is called Nutty Putty. Whatever, who named it, but yeah, a dude went into a cave. He went the wrong direction, and it ended into like a pit. And I'm not talking like a pit, like it's big enough just to fit like the upper part of his body. And now he's upside down in this hole deep inside of this cave. And they can't get him out, and the more like he sits there, the gravity just drives him deeper and deeper into that wedge.
What the heck?
And getting like ropes and pulleys and all the different things to try to get him out, and it's at a weird angle. They couldn't get him out. He just fucking died. He was upside down for I think 48 hours before he died. They couldn't get him out. Yeah. So a lot of these stories don't end, well. A guy underwater getting his tank wedged in some rocks, and he can't get out. Somebody better go down there and start chipping away at some rock. I don't know exactly what they do, but yeah, you're gonna run out of air and you're gonna die. That's a lot of anxiety. Stuff like that is frightening, and it's weird because I think that when we think about any stories that involve death, anything that is a lingering, long process, especially when people know you're there. It's one thing to get like lost in the desert and you die slowly. No one knows you're out there. No one's coming to help you. But when help does show up, and they're still basically saying like, yeah, we really can't do much for you. You're basically stuck in a hole and we can't get you out. That to me is frightening, because I think about that guy at some point, and they're trying to get him out, but it has to be at some point where they've tried every option and there's just nothing that we can do. And having to tell somebody like, well, I don't know how much longer you're going to last, but this is the end of the road for you. And being in that position where you're sitting in that hole going like, I'm going to die here and I don't know when it's going to be. It's going to be soon though. It's coming. To know about your death impending. It's what's always frightened me about plane crashes. A plane crash, that's probably one of the greatest ways to die. How much more instantaneous can it be? Problem is, you're falling from 35,000 feet, so you have at least a couple of minutes to think about it.
And ponder.
Yeah, like, this is it, right? And what do? You scream at the top of your lungs, you're praying to God, hugging your loved ones. That's the frightening part. And I think when people are afraid to fly, they're scared of flying. Oh, the crashing. That's the easiest part. It's the 3 or 4 minutes you're, careening to the ground.
Oh, there's another item I got stuck on the other night was Bermuda Triangle airplane disappearances.
I've been down that rabbit hole. I've always liked the Bermuda Triangle. It's fascinating.
Oh, it is. It is. And I think ever since I was a kid, I was always interested in Bermuda Triangle, Loch Ness Monster. I thought that was all pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I think the Bermuda Triangle is more of a myth because we haven't had that issue in decades. There hasn't been like mysterious disappearances. These are things that happened probably, maybe, I don't know what the most recent weird event where a plane flew or a boat went into the Bermuda Triangle and just disappeared. It's usually like from the 60s and a little bit earlier. Obviously, the tracking and GPS and all that stuff still, radars are still pretty new. But yeah, so I as a kid in the 80s, I really did think that the Bermuda Triangle had some problem. Like there was some kind of thing going on there that's...
like a vortex.
Yeah, and as I've gotten older, I realized that I think that that's an area of the planet where maybe radars don't work so well, and there's a number of mistakes that were made, human mistakes. You don't hear too much these days about a plane going to the Bermuda Triangle and just disappearing.
There's, on the one that I watched the other night, though, it was crazy because their plane took off in like Puerto Rico going to Miami. It disappears off the radar screen, and they're interviewing the pilot. Disappears off the radar screen because he's flying into some opening in the clouds, and then 12 hours later arrives over the airport in Miami with almost a full tank of gas. And there's like their watches were all weird and wonky, and this is back in like, I want to say it was like the late 70s. So I do think I thought that was pretty fascinating because it
is that real? It sounds like an urban legend.
I
want some verification on this.
I'll have to I can just go back in my history. I'll find that video and send it to you.
Yeah, I don't believe that because there was another plane story I heard, and I get the people that create these videos are trying to get clicks. So the story is presented to you as a story, like this really did happen, and it was about a plane that took off from, I don't know, JFK Airport. I think it was flying to another country. I think it's South America, and it just disappeared. Like it just went off the radar, and then 30 years later, it landed where it was supposed to be. Nobody aged. It's a whole. Is that Lost? Was it? No, it was not Lost. What was that show? Manifest, where like yeah. So, and it was presented when you watch this video. It's presented as being like a real thing that happened, but obviously as you're watching, you're like, well, this fucking didn't happen. And then at the end of the video, it's like they clarify that this was reported in newspapers in like South America, but nobody could verify that it actually ever happened. I'm like, fuck off.
Well, it's kind of like when they found the lost city of Atlantis, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, they'll present it as being real, and then at the end of the video, it's like, well, it's just what we think or the theory or whatever. But the rabbit holes, I mean, I think it's entertaining, and if you've got the time on your hands, I think it's totally awesome because you get exposed to things that, like, one, that you actually are interested in, you just are not thinking about it, and things that you know nothing about, that all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is interesting, and
tell me more.
Yeah, but I guess the downside is that, first of all, a lot of these videos are just total mind crack candy. It has no value other than to stimulate you for however long, and you could spend way too much time on these things. Yeah, what are you gonna? I don't got a job or kids to raise or bills to pay. I can just sit here for 15 hours watching dudes get hit in the nuts with baseball bats.
I do think it's a great tool, but it can be dangerous for I guess spreading rumors or this is live footage of a UFO landing in my backyard. And you're like, I saw it on the internet. It looks real.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's a free for all. Anybody can post any video at any time. I mean, we put this podcast on YouTube.
Yeah, I was literally just going to say, speaking of posting anything at any time and anyone able to do it.
Right. No one's stopping me putting up these things. And we're a fountain of misinformation.
Oh, that's outstanding. We're going to have to use that as a tagline. And also the internet's answer to the question that no one asked, and a fountain of misinformation.
I have an important announcement for you, so stay tuned.
Yo, that's some next level shit, bruh. So you got me. Big deal.
The internet's answer to a question no one asked. The Tilted Table with Sean and Joe.
And another episode of the Tilted Table put into the books.
And we are your official disseminators and fountain of misinformation.
That's right. And when you check YouTube, hopefully the algorithm will have the Tilted Table on the right side, and you should click on it.
Absolutely. We'll see you in the comment section.
I'm Sean Landon Clark.
And I am Joey Joe, the Fracky Mac.
We out of here.
Peace.